Hello, listeners. If you are curious about technical communications, then this podcast is for you. On each episode, I will interview a guest who will share their unique journey. This is Inside Tech Comm with Zahra Matabana. Let's get started. I'm honored to welcome today's guest and a very good friend of mine, Teresa Nguyen. Teresa, I hope I got your name right, but can you please pronounce it the original way for our listeners?
Oh, I love that. You are so intentional about that, Zora. Yes, I'm so happy to be on the show. And I love that, we are good friends beyond this. But yes, my last name is pronounced Nguyen. It is a very common Vietnamese last name. I sometimes tell people it's the Smiths of Vietnamese last names. But that's the accent. It's kind of all of the letters are silent, almost all of them.
Yes, and I hope I did justice to your last name.
You really did.
And I'll keep practicing. I promise about that.
You did wonderful. I got
you.
A million different ways to, and you were, yeah.
I'm close, right? So Teresa, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. It's a beautiful winter day here in Dallas, Texas. We're in the same part of the country and state. So I'm having...
I would agree. Yes. And I love your background. If our listeners could see, as you said, it's very Zen. So with that Zen picture in our minds, let's move forward.
Yes.
Yes. Nice deep breath.
This is going to turn into a meditation.
Let's attempt that. How about that? So Teresa, tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I know it runs deep, but just a brief introduction will do for now.
Yeah. So I am Vietnamese American, and the question of, where are you from always it comes at me in different ways. But I feel really comfortable answering this question with you, because we are friends and we do know each other on a personal level. Professionally, I am a user experience researcher. Currently, I work with a consultancy in Dallas called Project 202. I work with different clients from all different industries. Yeah, that's probably the most relatable version of my identity to most of your listeners. And I could go on about more than that if that's part of it.
Yes, and the whole intention is to kind of go on that journey with you, to learn a little more about you, your profession.
As we all know, we're winding down a pretty very different year than any of us have really experienced before. But one thing that I've really actually appreciated has been the opportunity and the time to reflect and really think about how important it is to me personally to be able to show up as my whole self in any space and not
I love that. When you started with your introduction, Vietnamese American, we all have these identities that we tend to hide and we only put a part of ourselves out there. So the fact that you're mentioning that you're trying to bring your whole self to wherever you are, sometimes it can be challenging, but it can also be very revealing and refreshing.
Absolutely. Yeah, revealing to yourself, because some of us haven't had the space to really think about who we are and where we come from, and also revealing about the spaces that we inhabit.
That got me thinking that technical communications has a lot that intersects with user experience. And in terms of the user analysis, in terms of the usability, in terms of the content that a user writes, and then content is the key here that intersects between user experience and technical communications. And I thought, wow, I'm having Teresa very soon on my show. And I want to understand from her, how can these two fields kind of come together? And what can we take away from these fields?
That is a really exciting preview of what is to come in this episode. I'm excited. As you were talking about user experience, the professional blends into the personal, especially lately, a lot for me. So I'm going to start with the most professional things and then we'll see where it goes. So what I mean by that is, let's just take the title or the craft, if you will, of user experience. And let's look at experience. An experience isn't just digital. It isn't even just in person. It's a blend of everything in the way that you interpret the world. And from a user's perspective, I look at that as a researcher as looking at them as a whole person. Yes, you do want to, understand where the product that you're testing or working on or trying to learn about or the domain fits into this person's life. But the most effective research and the most effective insights are going to consider this as a whole human being and a person. And that presents a lot of challenges too, because we have to think about our personal biases, the ones we are and aren't aware of. So I love this field because it's very human. It's about humans and how to make life better for humans who use things that other humans make.
Actually, something that got my attention was when you said human. And when I started my career, what I heard first was human interaction. And I think by what the field has come to be known today as user experience, I think that human element has kind of somewhere been lost. And that is my perception as I think deeper. But as you mentioned, the human element and the experience, it's also, again, revealing to me that no, the experience is you are starting to focus on the whole rather than just the user itself.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we're going to talk about technical communication at some point and how I got into that and why I'm probably mostly on this show. But I mean, really, I feel the responsibility of all of those crafts, of content strategists, of UX researchers and designers, of tech writers, technical communicators. Our responsibility is to hold software and the products and the people who develop and make them and market those things, hold them accountable to the fact that it is for humans. A lot of people will say that they champion, the user and the humans in any discussion that has to do with that. So,
wow,
yeah.
I like the strong stand you're taking there when you say that the people who are developing this, we have to make them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to dig deeper into that, but on another day, because I definitely would love to come back to that. And I could dedicate a whole episode to just talk about that, because there's so much that's going on with that word accountable there. And as a technical communicator, I'm thinking, right, what I'm doing is my craft holding the people who are developing the product accountable. Because from an outsider's perspective, that's not what's happening. But I think we are kind of starting to go into the philosophical aspects of our crafts. And I want to come back to you because your time is precious. And I want the user experience part of your journey to come through and shed light on what our listeners can take away. And with that, we did talk about how the two fields intersect, but you had a brief contact with technical communications. So can you share a little bit about that, what your background was and how did you become a UX researcher? Because you were not a UX researcher when you started your career. So definitely go ahead and share that with us.
That's correct. Yeah. I hadn't even heard about UX or what it even was. It was just two letters that I saw somewhere. I didn't know what they meant. So I came from journalism. I went to school for journalism. And I did a mix of newspaper, like print and television. So I did broadcast journalism for a little.
That sounds very cool to me, actually.
Yeah, it was a pretty fun job, I will say. Yeah, and I think the reason I brought up like the whole human experience part of it was because that is really the thread, the through line of all three of these things. Because what I love about all three of these different fields is that you have the opportunity to get paid to understand people better on a very human level.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's just something that it is a no-brainer for me, as if I could do something like that as a career. I understood early on that there are different ways of that. And so journalism happened to be, the thing that I was interested in because I was interested in current events. I like to write. And I didn't even realize then like how many skills that I would pick up in it. And then that would then end up transferring really, really well into tech writing and UX. Yeah, I guess it makes sense to start off with what I liked about journalism and what I didn't like and why I moved, from one to the next.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I just love that you get access as a journalist, to different domains. I get to talk to all the subject matter experts, if you will, in politics. When I worked the conservation beats for this community that I was in. So I got to follow the county like naturalist and geologist around. And that was kind of the subject matter that I was in. And then I also did like recreation. So I spoke with a lot of people who organized sports and community events like that. And,
wow, sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was up my alley, because I was an athlete at the time. So I got to just get to
Wait,
know.
you were an athlete Okay, how did the two blend together? Now, this doesn't make sense, okay?
So yeah, okay, we'll rewind it a little more. And, yeah, so I played a lot of basketball. I was a basketball player.
Okay.
I went to college on a scholarship for it, and I majored in journalism. And yeah, played ball and reported the news.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that inspired you to get into journalism.
Well, I think they were just two passions that I decided, like,
Two passions. All
yeah.
right. Okay. Now something makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Yeah. The basketball is probably like least related to any of this, but I'm sure we'll find a way for it to come full circle if we really tried.
We'll figure it out. I'll try.
Yeah. So the journalism, I love being able to interview people and come up with questions ahead of time based on what we wanted to know and what the story was and how the story is compelling to a community and society. So storytelling is another thread that goes through all of these things. And yeah, and it was also, I think, what tied most directly into how I ended up looking at technical writing as a career was the process of researching, potentially a very complicated matter, like a political issue or something, and understanding all of the nuances around it, all the different viewpoints, and then distilling that into something that makes sense, something that is closer to plain language that you can report on TV. Because the thing with communicating on screen is that you want to be very conversational. And so that was actually a skill that is still something I am polishing and working on. But communicating through writing is different than communicating through speaking. You don't want to speak into your television, into the people sitting on their couches as if you were writing, human. So the communication aspect of it really it was a challenge that I loved to take complex information and make it easy to understand. Yeah, and to get to do that in so many different fields and have access to that was just really exciting. It's life is an adventure, and I love to look at it that way.
I loved everything that you talked about in your experience as a journalist. One was the storytelling aspect and telling a compelling story. But then the challenge of, well, not the challenge, but the fact that when you're speaking, it's different from how you write, how you communicate through writing. So is that the reason why you explored technical communications? Is that what you wanted to kind of polish up on, if you will?
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I said that was the most direct, like, thread. I mean, the other one, I guess the one that really prompted me to take action was more of, so, as a journalist, your job is to find the truth and tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand the problems. But your job is not to be the one to necessarily solve them. You're presenting the facts, you're presenting the story, you're presenting viewpoints.
You got to be very objective about it.
Yeah, and I say objective in, with air quotes, because
yes.
No one is going to be 100%, unbiased. And yeah. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's good. It's important to have a viewpoint and an opinion on things. But as a journalist, there's a certain point that you can't cross, depending on who you work for, I guess. And I think I do like kind of framing it through my desire to be able to solve problems and to affect solutions to those problems. As we talk about this transition into the different fields, because technical communication is about uncovering the truth and telling the truth and documenting the truth. You are writing.
That sounds so deep. It sounds very deep, because I've never thought about technical communications as something that is uncovering the truth. And for you to share that perspective is actually pretty neat, I would say.
Yeah. That's I've actually never worded it that way before, but thanks to the way that you're framing this conversation and the opportunity you're giving me to speak about it, I'm glad that came out, and I hope that offers a unique perspective, or at least another way of saying it.
Yeah, I think when you think about your day-to-day as a writer, you're trying to document how the product works. But at the end of the day, you are trying to, as I said, trying to discover the truth about that product. Yes, there is a business need and you're trying to solve the business need, but you're sort of on a mission as a writer to get the truth out of your SMEs, your subject matter experts, so that you can solve a problem and help somebody out there.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to write something down that you just said. I'll get to it when we get to the UX part. Yeah, that's really good. And technical writers do even more than that. You document the truth, but you take it a step further and you take the time to understand the users and then to create a bridge between those things and to uncover the value then beyond that.
Beyond that, absolutely. Yeah. I think we need to have more such discussions. That's the objective of our conversation, is to kind of discover these hidden messages that are kind of tucked in deep within our fields and to bring them to the surface.
I love that. Yeah.
I totally, man, I'm discovering my own field. I've been in it for so long. Oh, all right. So you did technical writing. I want you to share what you did as a technical writer, because I know it was a very brief journey into technical communications before you went on to become a UX researcher.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is unconventional. I feel like maybe it is. But when I think about, and when I have thought about switching careers, because that's something that is so common now. So, more and more people are switching careers multiple times in their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my my philosophy around career and career switching, especially, we'll go with career switching, was, so the more established that I get, in UX research right now, I get a lot of, people who are in the process of transitioning. And the most common question I get is, and I actually got this very recently, is, what's your recommendation on what classes I should take? Should I go to school for this? Should I go to an expensive boot camp? Like, is this worth the investment? I try to reframe the decision making process around like whether this is a suitable field. Because yes, I mean, maybe you want to pursue more education, but there's other ways to do it. If you don't have the resources, I didn't have the resources to take an expensive university course around tech writing. The story.
Yes.
I don't talk about it, but there's we're naturally curious, I would say, if you work in any of these fields, any of the three, journalism, tech writing, and UX, you're generally curious and you're probably a pretty resourceful person. But if there's a lack of resources that you have, you're going to be even more resourceful. So I think that probably has influenced a lot of my moves, the way that I move through life and through my careers. It's not just to think about the education and what you need to know, but it's also understanding, like, what is it really like to build a career? And that involves networking. It involves understanding who other people who are doing this, who they work with, and just kind of building that out. And that, yeah. So for context for the listeners, what this event was, it was a meetup group that I found. I think it's just like Googled technical writing in Dallas. I just moved here from Iowa, where I was going to school and doing the journalism thing. So I was in a bigger city. This is a new career path. I was like, okay, I have no idea where to start. Let's go to Google. And so, yeah, I wanted to find who else was doing this, if there were any professional organizations around it. And fortunately, there was a Dallas chapter, or North Texas chapter, I should say.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you just Googled up and that's how you landed up at the event?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. So that's important. What you're saying is networking, reaching out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was how you discovered this.
Exactly. Yeah. At the time, meetup.com was pretty big. It's not that huge. I mean, maybe it is, but back then, meetup.com was a way for me to find people, like friends, like similar hobbies, but also there's a lot of professional organizations on there. So I'm pretty sure that's how I found you. So maybe that and or Google, some combination of the two.
But that's good to mention, right? Whatever, the technology and the platforms may change, but seeking out that community to network with, whatever your curiosity is at that point in time, to act on it, you never know where that can take you. So
I would have had no idea where that. Yeah. Yeah. And then the networking, a lot of people associate that with like really, ulterior motives and kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like smarmy.
Yeah.
Like networking doesn't have to be like that. It's just, for me, it was just a way for me to learn more about this field that I was interested in. And it was just an educational opportunity too. It's all mixed in together into that. It's not just about handing a business. It doesn't have to be that transactional. You're building relationships and you're sharing knowledge and you're sharing about yourself and you're learning about other people and how they got into it. And yeah.
This goes back to what you said earlier, right? That your personal and professional blend. So when you network, you are looking for that personal connection as well. So networking, it doesn't have to be about quote unquote schmooze. And I think schmoozing is not bad at all. If you have the gift of gab, go for it. But networking can be deep too, but you have to put yourself out there. You have to connect with people. Let's say that. You have to connect with people if you want to discover, and especially if you're looking for resources and you don't have deep pockets
Yeah.
to tap into, then this is your opportunity, because people are there to teach you and to work with you and to mentor you. But you have to first reach out to build that bridge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so much of it is just being yourself, but bringing a really positive energy. And I think I'm generally just a positive, energetic person.
I would agree. I would agree. I would absolutely agree. So you attended that first event, and then what happened?
Oh God. And then, so this particular event it was the president of STC National. That's probably why I felt like I needed to come dressed in a blazer.
Oh, I didn't.
I was like the president of this whole, not just the president of like the Dallas chapter, but the president. Yeah. And I felt really lucky. I was like, wow, what great timing. Like the next live meeting that they happen to have this person. And her name is Kit Brown Hoekstra, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. She's wonderful. I had a chance to meet her at the summit too. And yeah, it was great. So what came of that was, I came with this really, energetic vibe and really curious, really thirsty for knowledge and, growth. And yeah, I just kind of latched on and actually like the people who were already on the board, I guess, liked that and liked, thought I had something to help with this chapter, to help it grow and receive, a lot of mentorship in return for that. And that's how that worked out. And then I learned more about the opportunities that STC as an organization offered through the membership. So that's how I got connected and ended up getting sent to Ohio to the National Summit for free and networking there. And then that might have been where I first heard about personas and met somebody who gave a talk about them. So that was really.
So what did that trigger your exploration about UX, user experience? Where did that start? We've talked about you coming into technical communications and kind of discovering this community, but then something happened in that period which kind of put you on the path to becoming a UX researcher. So what triggered that?
Yeah, so I had been volunteering with the chapter in various different ways. And somewhere along the line, I took a technical communications 101. It was a certificate.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of pricey. Like it took me a little while to pay that off, but I was like, you know what? I really want to further my education in this because there are a lot of like really specific skills that I want to get better at. And that course really taught me how to write in a more succinct way and how to present information that is hierarchy of information and how to just break things down.
Mm-hmm. How to work with content.
Exactly. I remember that the first assignment in it was to like write a paragraph or something, and most people's paragraphs got torn apart because they were too wordy. They were too flowery.
Brevity is the name of the game.
Oh yeah. Mine got torn up pretty bad because in it I spoke about being a journalist. I thought I was all, I was slick. I was going to go in there and, rock it. And no. So, I mean, even that was a reality check. And it just really highlights, like you're saying, the art of writing in that manner. And not just writing, but also interpreting information and thinking about it. That is an art. That's something that robots aren't, I don't think, ever going to be able to do as well as
I hope not.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And then, and in the process of that, so I finished the class and then I kept networking and then I started to apply to jobs. So I had like I can't even call it a portfolio. It was an assignment. And I still remember it. And I still actually refer to it sometimes in conversation when I explain what tech writing is.
Uh-huh.
But the example, okay, that's a tangent. So I finished the class and then I was looking for jobs. And then in the process of that, I look at job descriptions. I look at different companies. I look at what the role of a tech writer is in these different companies. And then I don't get anywhere. They all are asking for 5 years of experience, 10 years.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And even the entry level ones, it was just like, I just didn't feel like I had just nothing opened up. And then we had a speaker for the North Texas Lone Star SEC chapter. His name's Brian Sullivan, and he was a prominent member, a leader for the UXPA, so the User Experience Professionals Association. It's an international organization that's been around for a long time, and this is the Dallas chapter of it. Mm-hmm. And so we had him come in as a speaker, and he talked about what UX is, and he talked about design thinking. and he talked about personas, all that stuff.
Wow. And that was your foray into user experience.
Yeah, yep. And then I checked him out and his organization, and they had a meetup, and I went to one of their events, and a lot happened between that and getting my first job. But again, another like pretty non-traditional way to get into an industry. I made a TV show about it.
I want you to talk about that because the traditional path is either through upgrading your skills or your educational qualifications. And you had a very unconventional path. And I know that you had your fair share of challenges, but please share with our audience what that journey was like. There is so much to learn from that experience, not just personally for me, but I think there is something that our listeners can take away, because I think you were undaunted. You had this goal in mind, and I know you were, you had set your eyes to get there, and you got there. And that's why I think your unconventional journey is that much more important. Please do share with us.
Yes. I haven't actually talked about this one in a while. So just to kind of set the stage, I went to this UX meetup, and it just so happened that the topic of the meetup was like a fundraiser for this group of a couple of guys who wanted to were kind of already making a web series about the user experience profession in the field. Mm-hmm. So just a quick and dirty like overview of what it was. It was like a kind of like a Shark Tank type of show, mm-hmm. Where you, so this version of it though had startups come on and pitch their products. So startups, most of them were like,
what an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. And they had a panel. Each episode had a different panel of user experience experts, what they called them. So these people have been working in this field for a long time, and they understand how to break products down, break user flows down, and critique them in a, like a Shark Tank style. So they're not investing their money in these startups, but they're offering them critique. And it was a cool concept. It was very educational, and I got to learn about different startups and industries. And it was a really interesting thing into that. So what I saw from that opportunity was a chance to leverage skills that I already had, which were video production and camera work and working with scripts and working with that like audiovisual equipment.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And it just made sense. I was doing some of that stuff for SDC like a little bit. But yeah, I mean, why would I want to go pay thousands of dollars for a certificate, when I could actually learn directly from experts who are working in the field? Nothing against professors. I have the deepest respect for like academia.
Absolutely.
especially as a researcher now. But yeah, it was great. I would be building my network with all of these professionals. And I knew that these were like very experienced people. And a lot of them actually, come from technical communication in a lot of ways. Many of them did. So yeah, and that ended up turning into a whole tour, and I got to meet experts in all different cities between here on the West Coast. We filmed in like 9 or 10 different cities, and it was kind of a coming of age, if you can even say that. I was like in my 20s, but it was its own coming of age journey. And because we were a startup ourselves, and we were very scrappy, and mm-hmm. everything that you watch in like the show Silicon Valley was some of what ended up happening with that whole group. But it was such a cool experience, and I'll always be thankful for the opportunity that the timing worked out so well, that I got to meet those guys, and all the people that I met through there. So many of them are still in my network to this day, and that was like 5-6 years ago, I think now. Wow.
Yeah, wow, I know it's been a while, but I think from your story, what I want to kind of focus on is it's not that the education will not take you far. It will definitely add value. Mm-hmm. No doubt about that. And like you said, if you have the resources, please do go seek out that education. You will definitely get value out of that. But if you don't have that opportunity, this is another way to plug into the community. And you would have not had that opportunity if you had not put yourself out there. And more importantly, leveraged on your skills, because you brought something to the table. As much as you were trying to learn from this community of people, you had something. So if you have something to give, think about it. What can you bring to the table? And we all have something to bring to the table.
So along the lines of storytelling, a skill that I honestly haven't actually used this particular method in my UX career yet, but storyboarding. Mm-hmm. So when I worked in journalism, it wasn't just the news. I also made like documentaries And that is absolutely like a little bit more of like a long form storytelling, right? It's not just a daily or weekly like news piece that just, no one's ever going to watch again. But it's a documentary, and it gets really in depth into things. But the way that you approach that from a story perspective, it kind of actually like the skill itself and that way of framing and thinking has helped in my research when I am past the point of having conducted the interviews and spoken to the users and analyze and synthesize the data. Then I have to report those findings and tell people why the hell they should care about all that stuff that you just paid me to do. Because it has to matter. It has to matter. And the way that decision makers who are human beings interpret that is through story. Yes, you can throw a slide full of numbers and bullet points at them, but what's the story? What are they supposed to remember from all of this? About what are they supposed to know about their users in order to design a product that meets their needs and objectives?
So it looks like your experience as a journalist has definitely brought not just value, but significant value. It's transferred over really well into what you're doing currently.
Yeah. I mean, interviewing people. The difference is in journalism, I would interview people who didn't want to talk to me.
Yeah. So now people want to talk to you?
Mm-hmm.
They do?
Yeah, I mean, they're usually they're getting paid, ideally.
Of course.
So yes, they expect me to, be speaking with them, and I don't have to track them down and knock on their door.
That must be such a relief, right?
It's nice, yeah.
It's nice.
Recruiting users is a challenge sometimes, but I'm not having to like fight all the time for it. So.
Yeah, see, sometimes as technical writers, we kind of have to, and I say this with the utmost respect, we have to plead with our subject matter experts for content.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wrote down. So there is, I would say, a difference in like how much you actually work with a subject matter expert of a product in technical writing than you do in UX research and design. Obviously, UX needs to understand the product on a technical level and understand how it works. We definitely don't spend as much time on that because we're not the ones documenting the nuts and bolts of it. So that's why technical writers, technical communicators talk to the SMEs more. Where we interact the most is during like the kickoff of a new project, and we have what's called stakeholder interviews. And that may or may not involve a technical subject matter expert, but it involves all of the stakeholders of this particular product or company. That means stakeholder basically is just like, it could be somebody in the C-suite, an executive. It could be head of marketing. It could be head of any number of departments, sales, products, design and research of the client side. So that really, to me, was the kind of hints at the reason that another big reason I switched to UX, because I think you know what I'm getting at, because you probably heard it in the other podcast. But yeah, for technical writers, one thing that I really picked up on, like a sentiment that I picked up on, was the challenge of not being able to affect the actual design of a product. It's more like you're documenting what's there, and you are in a position to, you are extremely well informed and in a fantastic position to point out the problems about it. But I didn't find that people that I spoke with, when I would, ask about what's challenging about their job, it was one of them. It was just like, yeah, we just don't have a lot of influence in the actual
Yes. Thank you for, first of all, bringing this up. And that was going to be one of my questions. So you naturally segued to to that point of our conversation. So you think the stakeholders would benefit by including technical writers?
100% I do. Yeah. I can actually remember, since I know, we do want to talk about how we collaborate with tech writers as the UX team. And I have only been on one project where the technical writer was really even mentioned. And when they were mentioned, it was like, should we include them in this next meeting or not? And I was like, yes.
Thank you for championing for us.
Those are my people. Yes, I want to speak with the technical writer, because what we were doing, we were looking at, it was a new product and they had kind of like a beta version of it. And, there was like this help section, right? Because there's always a help section.
Yes.
Yeah. So the help documentation, as a researcher, I wanted to know, like, what are people struggling with? People are using this help. Who's writing it? I want to know who's writing, because that's probably the person who's going to know what people are are asking about the most. And maybe this person has access to the user. Maybe they have a persona already. I'm a researcher, but like, I'm not going to walk in here and expect to like be the expert about them and be the one to make the UX persona. I'm like, no, I know already from my past experience with STC.
So was it helpful? Did you eventually get access to that technical writer?
I did, yes. She came into the next meeting. And yeah, I did learn some things, but I don't like that project kind of dropped off, or like I didn't really actually get to work with them. So yeah.
But in whatever that brief encounter was like, you
Yes.
think you definitely see a value in that partnership there?
Yes. They were valuable conversations too that came out of that because of the people who were in the room and the other stakeholders. So we had like the product manager, we had a business analyst, we had the UX team, and then we had a tech writer who was able to speak to those things. And she never would have had that chance if no one had really, raised their hand and said, hey, yeah, let's bring in the tech writer. And
Yeah.
already information and knowledge about your users in your market that you already have. Why wouldn't you use this person?
So the more we can bring the different players of the team together, there's definitely more power to that, because we will all work towards that same objective and we'll be in sync at that point. And probably you might get your documentation a day earlier because, the writers are part of the design and the review process.
No kidding. Yeah, it is a very powerful collaboration. One of the things that I loved a lot when I started to hear it in the UX industry was the rejection of lorem ipsum in your prototypes.
Huh.
So you don't want lorem ipsum because, lorem ipsum, if in case anyone doesn't know, it's just filler. It's filler words. It's just like, oh, I have, this wireframe and I know that there's some written content that like needs to go here, I don't care about finding out what that is. So I'm just going to fill in some gibberish in there and just for now, and then we'll kind of just design and build.
This is deep, Teresa. Yeah, because again, we are getting into the philosophical discussion, which is important. What you're trying to say is, let's not trivialize that content.
Yeah, this isn't even philosophical. This is extremely practical. Like, because that's, that when you're designing a prototype, there are decisions like around interactions and around the visual design of something, like websites say that you need to understand, like how much space do we need here for the content? And if you don't know what the content is it going to be 3 sentences or is it going to be 3 paragraphs? That's going to affect the design of all of this, of your wireframe and of your prototype. And content strategy, I mean, when you going back to the word experience and user experience, content and words are a huge part of the experience.
Is there any advice that you would like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, going from technical writing to UX research. So if you look at like a subject matter expert interview, or even a user interview, like a persona interview, you're already doing UX research there. Where it extends into its own field is where you pick up different methodologies to answer different questions, to answer deeper questions about not just the product, but also about the market and about the users and how all of that connects into the business goals and how that actually directly informs the design from the get-go, whether it's a new iteration of a particular flow or whether it's a completely new project or product, That's where research comes in. And we have, researchers work with qualitative data and they work with quantitative data. Usually there's more of a specialization between one of the two for a given researcher, kind of depending on what your background is. But we do try to use mixed methods. So a mix of qualitative and quantitative, because quantitative is good. It's more challenging. It's much more technical to work with. I'm personally, I'm stronger with qualitative. Qualitative also sometimes takes a lot more time because that's where you get into going into the field and observing your users and spending a long time. Like a lot of roots in these methodologies, they come from academic research. They come from ethnography.
Okay.
So yeah.
So that begs the question, Teresa, for somebody like me who has a fear of math and numbers. When you said quantitative, I'm like, okay, how has that, for somebody like me who's got that fear of numbers, is it easy to overcome? Not that fear, but can you make it in this field as a UX researcher?
Yeah, I certainly am. Yeah.
Okay.
Fortunately, I do work. Project 202 is great about giving you resources to learn about how to do either qualitative or quantitative, whichever one that you would want to grow in. Quantitative is really important because when companies make business decisions, they're not going to want to make them off of like a sample size of 8 users in one study, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find a way to scale your research and to do maybe unmoderated studies that you can scale to hundreds of people, thousands of people through a survey or some other, like, there are a lot of unmoderated methods to use.
Okay.
Prototyping and doing usability testing. So that is a way to get more numbers. And then there's also like market research. This is where a lot of collaboration can happen between like marketing and data scientists.
Okay. So what you're also trying to say is that there are people out there. So it's not all on you.
Correct. Yes, it is not all on you, nor should it be, frankly.
Not sure. Okay.
Nor should it be. So, but yeah, I think the important thing is if you are, intimidated by statistics and numbers and all of that data visualization, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's perfectly natural. It's really, I find that like, I'm not scared of it. I want to lean into it more when I think of it in terms of what does it mean to get to the truth? I need numbers to get to the truth. So how do I get those numbers? Let's do it.
Okay.
What do I have to learn? Yeah.
I like the word lean in. And when you say lean in, it also has the connotation of a support that you have around you that you can lean into.
It sure helps.
Without overusing it.
Sure. I mean, if you are expected to deliver the numbers, but you are not given the resources and the space and the time to do that, that is an extremely stressful thing. And that is something that happens a lot in UX in general, but for researchers, because it's so easy for the scope of our studies to get blown out of proportion and for people to expect things that we do not scope the time and the resources to do this. There's a lot of people don't understand how much time it does take to do good, qualitative research, especially. It's a lot. It's something I'm still learning to do more efficiently, more proficiently, all of that. Yeah, it's something I'm excited to grow in. I would say this applies to anyone getting into a new, like either technical writing or UX, or even if you're pretty experienced. I think even, mid to experienced level professionals who are in the business of finding the truth and telling the truth and advocating for solutions. It's to stay grounded in your intuition that is based on the evidence that you found in your interviews, in your experience with a product. Stay grounded in that and find your confidence in that.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
But
yeah.
Trust yourself and the good
Trust
work.
yourself. Yes. And on that note, Teresa, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. And thank you for taking the time and for sharing your wonderful journey with us.
Thanks for having me on, Zora. I hope your listeners enjoyed this and have more questions to ask.
I'm sure they will. I have. Thank you, Teresa. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share on your social media to help me reach a wider audience. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, including Apple, Google, or Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at InsideTechComm or visit us at www.insidetechcomm.show for the latest updates. Catch you on another episode.